Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Face It. I'm Sean SPM, your host. This is a podcast all about the PPE industry, and we are super happy to have Mr. Tony Lawand on with us today. He is joining us from Toronto, Ontario, and he is the CEO of a company called Armorgen, and they have been brokering PPE for us, and we are wondering what's going on with him, and we're going to hear about his adventures. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. Let's face it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Face It. I am your host, Sean McKay, and you are watching a podcast all about the PPE industry. We are happy to have Mr. Tony Lawand with us. Tony, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Yeah, terrific. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for coming on. I know you guys don't have much else to do, being stuck up there in a lockdown. Tell us how it's been going out there in Toronto. Doug Ford's got the province locked down still, right?
Yeah, pretty much so. I mean, it's been off and on, but mostly the lockdown's been on for the past year. Schools have been off and on as well. I mean, up until next week, even things as simple as a golf course or tennis court's been still closed. So we're pretty much in considered full lockdown mode, even though we've got over probably 60% of the Ontario population's got their first shots. For COVID, but so we're going to start opening things up.
That's good. So you have, like a lot of entrepreneurs in this country, made the brave move to pivot your interest in your business into PPE. And I want to get into that a little further with you, but your background now is really interesting to me. You came from a world of CBD, and from what I could read, you are the godfather of the CBD world. Tell me about how that came to light, please.
That sounds ominous, but yeah, it was about 6 years ago. We started looking into it. I had a little bit of a background, very slight, but CBD none. It was I could barely pronounce the word, cannabidiol. Didn't know what it was, and just learned it very, very quickly. How it comes through, from THC, hemp, and so forth. And we saw it in the very early days as being, I predicted it to be a very massive growth. I knew the health benefits. I knew the old cannabis guys had been looking into it, but, it wasn't readily available. So I decided to endeavor and start putting together, major operations. So I created pretty much one of the first and probably the biggest CBD company in Canada. By the time probably around 2017, it had grown to where we were white labeling and making pretty much the majority of the product that was on the market. We used to white label. We had our own brands as well, very well known. We manufactured approximately 20 to 25 different products, including pet products. I created one of the first pet products that ever came into Canada.
For pets, wow. So what? So dog food that has CBD in it for.
I avoided food items. Well, the problem with CBD is when you ingest it, the acids in your stomach will usually break it down, and you kind of lose the potency. So we used to make oils, more pure products, and everything we had 0% THC. There was not a drop, nothing in it. So I was making all the products from a pure CBD extract. So that it had some fantastic results. It wasn't just your dogs and cats. We knew a lot of the horse and ranchers were using.
Oh wow!
In the world.
That's fascinating. So wow, is that ever left field from the PPE world? So welcome to the pivot, I guess, as they say, right?
Yeah.
So now Armorgen, that is your main arm, no pun intended, of your PPE reach. Is that right?
Yeah, when we saw about a little over a year ago, probably about 14, 15 months ago, we saw that this was here to stay. We forecasted that for sure. Even if this pandemic gets nice, clear, free, and done, you're always going to have this popping up. Obviously we didn't know the magnitude it was going to create and lock down the world, but obviously it has come about that way. But we figured that there's going to be a need for new developments, old renovations, casinos, hotels, airports that are going to need to put protocols in place. They're going to need that high technology that comes with anything like this that happens. And so we created and put together a group of guys, experts in their line fields, whether it be technical, scientific, and we started putting together some programs and some white papers to help these new developers, and obviously brokerage was the main, forefront of all that. So brokering PPE is the main function of that, and probably the most profitable, as you would imagine.
Okay, well, that's sounds really exciting. So when you say we in a group of people, is that primarily a Canadian company then, or you reached down into the United States? I understand as well.
Yeah, my background is, I've only lived in Canada for the past 6 years, so
Oh, is that right? Okay,
I grew up
excellent.
in the States, southern Florida, and
Hmm.
mostly I've lived all over the world. I've
Okay.
all over the world, and most of my contacts and partners and everything else are based in the United States. So
Hmm.
we kind of got all our heads together, and the good part is everybody's got their own specialties. Everybody's good at what they do, whether it be technology, finance, even the crypto based or the scientific based. And we kind of just put this whole group together and started just working in our separate directions to put it all together.
You know what? I'm seeing a lot of that actually. There's been a collective movement of unity within the market here. I'd like to get into it with you a bit later. I mean, we've been talking about, well, for that matter, let's talk about it now. We've been talking with a group called CAPEM from out of Ontario, and a lot of it's been about supply chain, right? Have you, I mean, that seems to be a lot of issue. Is the supply chain going to run out? Are we, is everybody caught up? Are we, is it, has the river dried up, as they say, what's your point of view on that?
No, it's this is the part that's kind of funny. What you see on the face is very different from what the inner workings are. It was funny. I checked my database just recently, and I'd connected with almost 500 professionals worldwide. That included the lawyers, that included the background big boys, the big hedge funds, some mid scheme brokers, some facilitators, so forth and so on. And the problem is, this is PPE is not a product that, what it was designed to do, and that's to get to the first responders, get to the hospitals, and get to the people that actually want it, use it, and need it. It's become a commodity. Like it or hate it, that's the reality of the world right now. So there are tons and tons of product sitting in warehouses worldwide. Lots in the United States, not so much in Canada, and some of the stuff in the European area, globally. But it's literally like selling sugar, corn, cocoa, gold, oil, paper transfers, and the product never moves. So you've got this whole buildup, and companies like 3M or the glove companies like Cranberries and Cardinals and a dozen other brand names, have produced all these goods. They end up in warehouses, get collected up, and the guys that had paid for the outlet, paid for the manufacturing from the facilities themselves, or bought out those lines. They just end up being you know being put into warehouses, loaded up, and sometimes they never move. And so you get warehouse after warehouse. And so everybody says, well, there's a shortage. Well, there's not a shortage. The problem is you've got all of these brokers, and that are just moving the paper back and forth. The majority of the higher end guys are hedge funds, the major hedge funds, the major companies that you would recognize so easily, are all involved in this. Banks are all involved. They're funding this thing. So you're talking about billions and trillions of dollars worldwide, just like the gold market, any other commodity market.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, it doesn't get to the end users.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Well, something of this scale, I mean, that's just how it rolls, right? So what is the main challenge then? Is it finding the PPE, or is it getting the PPE to the people
I
once you found it?
The problem is getting the real end user to the plate. The usual problem is it's too many layers. So you
Uh,
brokers and proxy buyers, which are buyers that are kind of midway. They say they're the buyer, and it turns out they're not the buyer. And
hmm,
more levels, and everybody wants to add on their high margin.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
hence the reason why it never ends up to the hospitals or the first responders that actually want these goods. And there's a lot of counterfeit, or I wouldn't even say counterfeit, very, very cheaply made products, which, can't end up in a hospital's hands, can't end up first responders' hands. It's just too dangerous. And
Mm-hmm.
and the smaller quantities are just very expensive. So, we can find those smaller quantities. They are available and they'll be sitting in warehouses. But the biggest problem is it's not like buying a car.
Mm-hmm.
Buy a, Ford Focus. Well, okay, I can see it. I can go to the dealership, look at it, feel, touch it. And there's my credit card, there's my check, and I buy it.
Yeah.
In the market, it's completely different. All the sellers have put it in their heads that because in their mind, every 99% of the buyers are fake. So they want your firstborn in blood in advance.
Sure.
And made it almost a very, very difficult sale to actually consummate.
Right. So it's like you're dealing with like a structure, like almost like, I guess you're probably dealing with a lot of corporations that are challenging, what you're doing, right? Or that are able to kind of float, 90-day terms and those kind of things. And I mean, as a, as just one, it's just one example, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Problem is the standard operating procedures for a buyer or a
Mm-hmm.
seller, they're usually very, very different and apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because you're dealing with very, very wealthy hedge funds, business people, and they're usually, the old saying, the guy with the gold makes the rules. And it's the exact opposite of PP, absolutely the exact opposite. The guy with gold is the guy that's got the real product, the
Ah.
seller. So he's
Mm-hmm.
going to make it the way he wants. He doesn't care who you are. And you come up and say, hey, I've got this general that's buying for the government. They don't care. I've got this hedge fund. I've got this well-known pharmaceutical company. They don't care because most of it in their mind is not real. So you got to pull teeth to get that buyer to show his true colors, to show that he's got the money, because we're talking about, a lot of money.
Sure. Yeah.
Normal case, we're not talking about buying a car or a house here, or even a building, a commercial building. You're talking about, much higher numbers.
Right. So, well, who exactly is on the playing field with us then? I mean, like, can you be a little more specific about like
Right
who
now,
you're contending with?
everybody and
Yeah.
his mother, you're talking about, remember, everybody's working from home, so it's not like they have to fly all over the world to meet anybody. So
This is
you got
true.
their underwear sitting behind their computer, professing to be this big broker, and has the product. It's his product, or his buyers, his sellers got it. He's direct and this and that. And what happens is you've got these layers and layers and layers of chains, and it's become crazy. I mean, to say the least. There's a lot of fraud in the business. You get paperwork gets transferred and floated all over the place. Unfortunately, it's rife with fraud.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter whether you're dealing with basic attorneys or the top attorneys. It floats through everywhere,
Hmm.
and usually everybody just bypasses it and goes to the next file. So I know a lot of these higher end attorneys, and a lot of them have, they've never been in the PPE industry, and
Hmm.
kind of just pivoted into the industry because it becomes so lucrative.
Hmm.
And again, you've got the major guys in the business, your commodities brokers, your big pharmaceutical companies, your big healthcare companies. You've got government, and it's just everybody who's mothers in the business. It's
If
funny.
if we could just get rid of the mothers, maybe that would, maybe make some more room, eh?
What, some of them are actually the best ones I'm dealing with, because a lot of the facilitators that I deal with,
Right.
it took over a year to weed through the guys that I can actually say that I trust what they tell me and what they've written.
Sure. Sure.
So, no one's a psychic. You go,
Right.
everybody on
Hmm.
on faith, and
Yeah.
its value, but
Yeah.
the very end, something happens and the money's not really there. That's usually the problem, is
Hmm.
don't have the actual buyer with the actual transactable
Hmm.
funds.
Right.
I could show you a bank statement. I could show you a bank letter that I have this and that, but
Hmm.
it comes down to actually making the sale.
Hmm.
You just assume that they're going to have it flipped and take somebody else's money.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
The Danny DeVito movie, other people's money.
Right. This
Everything
is
else,
so,
it's the same thing.
yeah. What a racket, hey? Crazy. So you are obviously, you've done your homework because you've got an amazing reputation for having quality PPE at your fingertips. So where are you getting your products and how are you getting such good PPE?
A year ago, the problem wasn't the buyers. The buyers, they were there. They were
Mhm.
up front. They were showing, flashing their money, and they were showing who they were and being very open. And unfortunately, the sellers weren't. There were very, very few real sellers. There was a lot of people that quoted to be, or they could get it done. If you tried to go through the normal 3M's general corporate stage, it took months. You couldn't get through it. There was 5,000 applications for, maybe half a dozen, a handful would actually get through. So you had that the seller is the problem. Now it's the buyers that are a problem. Too many people are what we call that proxy buyer. So they've got the real buyer behind them, but they don't want to flash this guy. They're assuming that that guy is going to get, you're going to get circumvented, and that guy's going to go direct, and you're going to cut out all these brokers. And it happens all the time. I have no doubt that I've probably been chopped out of a few deals, uh, very lucrative deals. And unfortunately, greed is rampant in the market.
So Tony, could you tell me about what products have been moving the most? Like what are you selling the most of? Is it face masks or gloves or what's the hot commodity?
On the cheaper level, obviously the basic 3-ply mask is one of the most used surgical masks. The typical blue one that you see in hospitals and first responders.
Mhm.
Uh, that's a very common item, very cheap item. We're working with direct manufacturers. Our friends and partners at Crown, being the main one. The N95 is an important factor there. But probably the one that the items that are most common right now and the largest amounts out there and the largest production was the 3M 1860 mask, which is the one that became famous, especially after Trump threw their name out there and kind of threw them in the spotlight. And what was originally a 20, 30 cent production manufactured mask turned out to start selling for $2, $3, $4. You know, Manufacturing cost has gone up, but I don't think they went up quite that much. And right now, probably the most common item right now is the surgical gloves. And the surgical gloves are probably the most traded item at the moment, even over and above the masks. And your popular brands there are probably Cranberry, Cardinal, and again, these were brought about by the facilitators that brought out those the masks. They either changed production lines or just bought out production lines. There was a lot of manufacturing facilities that converted their original machinery to PPE. And they saw the longevity of it, and they were getting bought out by these very, very wealthy individuals, whether they be hedge funds or individuals themselves. And the money
Mhm.
just started floating, into Malaysia, Asia, Thailand. Those are the main places that those gloves are being manufactured. And
Mhm.
there's not an empty ship. I mean, there's a backlog of shipping containers, coming into probably the main port is Long Beach in California. That's
Right,
where PPE lands.
right.
You know,
Sure, sure.
even
Well,
stuff in it.
oh, no, I was just going to say that the thing about gloves that fascinates me that I is that they can't be made anywhere else but overseas, right? This is the problem. Like,
Well, not particularly, because as we proved with the Crown Mutual product, we
Mhm.
manufactured that in Vancouver, and it's North American made, and it comes up to all the highest standards, which is the most important thing, especially when you're dealing with a hospital. A hospital, you cannot make a mistake. You cannot have a cheap product. You can't have anything that's going to fail on you, or to leak or have defects. That's you're talking about lives at stake. And you obviously got to protect your first responders, very importantly. Um, but you're going to find that it's very, very expensive on the glove side to actually manufacture in North America, whether that be Canada or the US. Whereas we cracked the nut on the 3-ply masks. We were able to to work it out to where we got it to a fairly reasonable amount. But the sales have been far and few in between, especially from hospitals and government entities uh, that are saying, "Hey, we want American made, we want Canadian made," and
Hmm.
well, we've got it. Here you go. And we're still not finding the governments or the hospitals stepping up to the plate and buying the stuff that's in front of them. They're still buying the cheaper foreign-made product because it's that much cheaper. And unfortunately, as you've seen, you heard about like what happened in Quebec and a few other places where uh, tainted materials, and they had to destroy them. That
Hmm.
cheaper, that double, tripled your cost. But they don't think that.
Sure.
They're looking.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of waste, a lot of poor judgment on, along the way. What do you think we need to do to get some of this Canadian-made product into the hands of Canadians? Like, what has to be done?
The government's the problem. The government, the way they procure, PPE cannot be procured the way they've set up to procure every other product in the past, because
Hmm.
sellers, it used to be, if you said, "Oh, I got a government, I got a government buyer, this and that, I got the Department of Transportation, I've got the Army, the Navy, whatever it was," and everybody would fall on their face to just grab those deals. And now it's the opposite, because the governments don't procure in the manner of a business. They can't compete.
Hmm.
They need you to jump through so many hoops beforehand. The sellers are like, "I don't need that. I got a guy with cash in his hand, and he's going to walk in and he's going to make the deal, and it's going to be done." Whereas the government
Hmm.
have to sit around and make bids and jump through all these hoops, and they never get it.
Hmm.
Or by the time they get it, it's so much more expensive because some private individual did buy it, and
Sure.
they're gonna rate the government on it.
Hmm.
That's the problem with all this, is it's again. So it's
Yeah,
the system is definitely broken,
I
and
see.
irony of it all is by the time they fix it,
Hmm.
we're going to be 12, 15, 18, 20 months into the deal, and we've lost all that time. I have no
Sure.
doubt that this pandemic could have, could have been shortened, as we all agree, your gloves, your masks, your sanitizers, and so forth would make a good dent into bringing it down, bringing the numbers down. But it wasn't available. It wasn't there in the early stage.
Hmm.
So it's a domino effect. You know,
Right. Right.
Hell, as a broker, I should be saying, "Hey, that's great for me. The longer this lasts, the more it lasts, it's better for me. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to have a longer longevity of it." But
Hmm.
as the normal individual, I would say it's stupidity. It's ridiculous.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, again, it's a domino effect, and it's a
Hmm.
worldwide domino effect.
Yeah.
You take a look at what's happening with India right now. India was giving away the vaccine, giving it away to people. They manufacture a lot of PPE. What did they
Hmm.
do? They sold it all out. And what
Right.
are they doing now? Now they're critical.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely dire over there. That's for sure. Well, what do you think is going to happen next then for Armorgen? Like, where do you guys, where do you next few months, or down the near distant road?
it's taken me 15 months, and I'm a glutton for punishment. Because of the lockdowns, and you can call it good, bad, or different on the business side. It's cooped up for 15 months with an 8-year-old and uh, shady weather. Toronto weather is a little bit shady, uh, but I've it's given me the time to work 10, 12, 15 hours a day making those good connections. So right now in my back pocket, I've got absolutely some of the best networked PPE sellers in the industry. More importantly, I know that there's going to be a lot of other business that we're going to do together. I've managed to just, take from the 500 and take a small handful of those and say, these are the guys we're going to do business with, because we could done on the PPE side of things, and we think that that's going to make Armorgen a major force in the market for sure. We've got a lot of different ideas. We're going to try to raise some major funds. We'd like to be buyers and sellers of our own product. We'd like to do some more manufacturing. There's still a lot of work in the PPE space. But during this period, a lot of nuances have come about, some new technologies, even some new pharmaceuticals that we've met in the meantime, because all these people in the industry they were with, I would have never been able in 15 months to meet the amount of people I did. And I used to travel 150,000 miles a year up until 15 months ago. I went to a lot of expos and I presented, and I met a lot of people, in my travels, and this was worldwide. And I got to tell you, Sean, it's been incredible, the groups that we've put together, and the powerhouses. And always about the people I deal with. It's not as much the company, or it's really about the people, because that human resource is like no other.
Hey, Tony, I want to thank you so much for coming on Let's Face It with me today. You've been a really great guest. We've learned a lot from you. We'd love to check in with you again to see how things are going, maybe in a couple of months. And we'll have your links and everything else below for everybody to check out further. So
That's
thanks,
terrific.
man. And yeah,
And as always, it's great speaking with you.
yeah, for sure. So we'll be in touch. And everybody, thanks again for watching Let's Face It. And make sure you stay covered up. All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Stay safe. Thanks.